Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. You asked for it. You waited for it. And here it is, the first episode ever of Feel the Burns. Take it away, Dave.
And now, a podcast about the coolest filmmaker around. It's time for Feel the Burns.
Starring Josh Bell, who loves Ed Burns.
Did you make Dave write a new theme song just for this episode?
I did it before he asked, actually.
we mind melded. Feel the Burns is a big deal. We know what's coming, so you know.
Yeah, so I don't know how this even happened, but somehow some kind of running joke has been that we were going to launch a podcast about the filmmaker that no one would ever want to listen to a podcast about, Edward Burns. And so when this season arose, where we were drafting different years from our past seasons to pick as part of this retrospective, Jason, as the king of Christmas movies, decided to pick 2012 for one of his Christmas episodes and have us talk about the Fitzgerald Family Christmas, the Edward Burns film.
Not exactly true, Josh. I gave you a list of many different Christmas movies, and you were the one who dialed in on Fitzgerald Family Christmas.
On that list, you had highlighted the ones that you actually wanted to do. And it was this and Eyes Wide Shut, which we just had in our last episode, and I think one other. So I generously acknowledged that we were going to
feel the burns.
We were going to feel the burns here, I guess, and do this. And I mean, it's nice to have this little in joke, and then get to have it become a whole episode. As we were talking about the other day, we still haven't covered Alfred Hitchcock, but here we are with Edward Burns and the Fitzgerald Family Christmas from 2012.
Once we get through Feel the Burns, we could start focusing on like Kurosawa, Tarkovsky,
also other filmmakers that we've never talked about before.
Right. We had to get through Feel the Burns first. So.
No.
Have we done Coppola yet? I don't think we've done Coppola.
Yeah, we have. We talked about the Cotton Club.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is going to be the first and last episode, I think, of Feel the Burns.
That's definitely not true, because eventually we'll do 95, and he won Sundance with Brothers McGlone. So
we'll get to that when we get to that, but we will not be launching, I don't think, a whole series. But for now, here we are with Edward Burns, the filmmaker who, as you said, launched his career in 1995 at Sundance by winning with his debut film, The Brothers McGlone, and seemingly Jen just kind of kept making movies like that for the next nearly 30 years now. And I have to admit, Jason bugged me this whole week and more about watching more Ed Burns movies than just the Fitzgerald Family Christmas. And I have not seen any others. I have been watching various other things for various other projects and did not end up squeezing in another Ed Burns film. But I'm sure The Brothers McGlone is better than this. But at this point, I feel like I'm full up on the Ed Burns. I feel like one was enough.
You know, Josh, you keep refusing to feel the burns, but eventually the burns will feel you.
That does not sound like what we want it to sound like, I don't think. This movie is part of Ed Burns' sort of ongoing project. He is a pioneer of making films for video on demand release. One of his films, is it Purple
Violets, was the first movie ever released exclusively on iTunes and was a big iTunes hit. And it's a pretty good movie. I know you're not going to believe me, but it's, maybe top 5 or 6 of the Ed Burns catalog there.
That does not equate to pretty good movie, but I'll take your word for it.
You don't like Patrick Wilson and Selma Blair? Is that what you're telling me?
They're fine, but I doubt I'll be watching that film. But he did, you have to give him credit for sort of having that foresight, and he made these movies. I couldn't find the exact budget for this film.
250,000.
All right, there you go. Jason has read Ed Burns' autobiography, so
I did.
he's going to have some facts.
It's called Independent Ed, and I reread the chapter this morning on Fitzgerald Family Christmas, and he was saying how he saw Tom Rothman, the head of Sony now?
Yeah, I believe he has been for a while.
And Tom Rothman estimated the budget to be between $4 and $6 million, Josh. So
I would not have guessed that. In fact, because my what I was going to say is that all the info that I had found was that the budgets for these small films that he's released primarily on demand have been as low as $10,000, and I was going to guess that it was closer to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, you got to give him credit, right? Like, I mean, I know you like to punchline my guy Ed Burns, but Josh, he didn't go do the crappy thing that we see all the time now, which is like, I made an indie, now I'm going to go do a Marvel movie. And of course he was before that, but he stayed in the indie world. He didn't like having to deal with like the idea of like finding financiers, right? And everything. So, I mean, we just mentioned Coppola, who financed his own movie this year, but what he did instead was like, he's like, hey man, I can do like a 4-person crew, and I can do like kind of solitary locations and kind of fill the frame how I want to fill it. And so he was making a lot of movies at $25,000, but this was probably his most successful movie since She's the One.
Yeah, I mean, I will give him credit for sticking to his artistic vision, as kind of weak as I may find it, at least here in this film. And you're right. He didn't. I mean, he had that big success with the Brothers McMullen, and he went on to make She's the One, which was sort of a bigger budget version of the Brothers McMullen, it seems like, or a bigger budget version of his thing. But he didn't become this director for hire to make big studio films. And he hasn't even, I mean, he's worked in TV, as we'll talk about, but it's not like he's a director for hire there either. It's not like he's off directing episodes of, Succession and Stranger Things or something in the meantime to make some money. He is putting all of his attention into his own projects. And yeah, I totally give him credit for that. I may not particularly be compelled by this project or maybe any of his others. And it seems like he has a very small, unlike someone, I think, who he invites comparisons to, like Kevin Smith, who we've talked about, who also just kind of, I mean, aside from 1 or 2 projects, really has honed in on doing his own thing for his own audience. I feel like whether or not you like those movies, there's a much more devoted Kevin Smith fan base that means it makes sense for him to be doing that versus the Ed Burns fan base.
So I can't believe I'm saying this, but Ed Burns at least is taking more risks than Kevin Smith, right? Like, he hasn't revisited the characters over and over again, perhaps the themes and the neighborhoods. But
yeah, I mean, they're just the same kinds of characters with different names, it seems like.
No, Josh, see, this is your uneducated point of view on Ed Burns, because it was, after She's the One, he kind of moved away from this like blue collar, Long Island, Irish family stuff. And then here's the full story if you want to know it from independent Ed himself, Josh. When he was hired to act on Alex Cross with our guy Tyler Perry had rewatched Brothers McMullen, and he said, hey man, this was your most critically acclaimed film. And then She's the One was your highest grossing film. How come you haven't gone back to this kind of Irish American family dynamic? And Tyler Perry said, what you got to do is super serve your niche. And that kind of brought him to Fitzgerald's Family Christmas. And it was, like I said, his most successful movie since She's the One. So, I mean, if nothing else, he's trying different things to varied results. But, I'm all for Ed Burns. I hope we still get that Brothers McMullen prequel.
Okay. Well, I feel like if he followed the Tyler Perry model, he would be making movies with the same characters doing the same things. So
like Kevin Smith. So
exactly like Kevin Smith, although Tyler Perry much more prolific. And not to give Tyler Perry any credit, and I've only actually ever seen one of his films, but he is so prolific that he can make the same movies with the same characters doing the same things constantly, and yet still branch out and do, like a World War II movie and a period movie about jazz musicians, because he directs like 4 movies a year. Ed Burns not quite that prolific. But
yeah, Well, with Tyler Perry, I mean, like, I think that super serve your niche is like really what he does so well, right? And to me, the filmmaker I compare Ed Burns to is John Cassavetes because he's an actor for hire and he puts all of his money into his own movies.
Well, we'll leave the quality comparisons on that front to maybe our friend Joe Black or something.
Feel the burns.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, also that you say that this was his most successful film since She's the One. And maybe because of that release model, it made a lot of money on demand. Unfortunately, even now, I mean, for the entire history of VOD releases, that's not really, those aren't numbers that are readily available. Box office wise, this made $50,292, which if its budget was $250,000 is not great. But it was released on demand, I think, almost a month before it even went to theaters. So the theatrical release was almost an afterthought. And presumably it made its money back on demand. But to say that it was his most successful since then, it doesn't sound like it was a huge success.
Well, the reason it was released in theaters at all was just so he could get reviews from, it's interesting in the book. He's like, if you don't put it out in theaters, then the major papers won't review you, which of course now is different, right?
Right.
But again, you're talking about like foresight. Like he was breaking this model down before it was a model, which I respect that, man. So, and I think it's a Christmas movie. It's a family movie, whether you like it or not, like that's going to warrant people finding it every year.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, from a business standpoint, it makes sense. And even if it was 250,000 and not 10,000, that's still a very, very small budget in the scheme of filmmaking. And he clearly figured something out with that Purple Violets movie, and has stuck with that release model, I think, pretty much all the way since then. I'm sort of surprised he hasn't managed to partner like with Netflix or something like Tyler Perry has, to release these movies rather than putting them out just for on-demand rentals. But I suppose, again, that goes to the fact that he has full artistic independence on these films, and he doesn't have a traditional studio, nor does he have a streaming service like Netflix telling him what to do.
No, he should partner with Guinness and just release it on the Guinness website.
He should. Yes, exactly. We're going to start the Guinness streaming service. So interestingly, here's a good segue to the reviews. You said that was the reason for theatrical release. And you're right in the sense that just glancing through reviews, they were all timed to the theatrical release. Several of the reviews that I looked at mentioned like, oh, this already came out on demand and now it's playing at a theater in this town or whatever. So that worked out. Critics were mixed on it, though. Stephen Holden in the New York Times said, the Fitzgerald Family Christmas manages the considerable feat of interweaving the personal dramas of 9 members of a boisterous Irish-American clan into a coherent mosaic with a streamlined narrative drive. This meditation on forgiveness in the season of glad tidings may lose some steam as it speeds to very predictable places, but it doesn't turn into a tear-stained greeting card plastered with tinsel and stale peppermints. This comfortably lived-in movie, written and directed by Edward Burns, offers a textbook example of screenwriting concision. Volumes of information and drama are conveyed with minimal dialogue in a tone so relaxed and offhand, you hardly notice the painstaking craftsmanship that went into it.
Well, Stephen Holden clearly feels the burns, Josh.
Yeah, so this is the most positive review I've got. But yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of these in a way are backhanded compliments, like a textbook example of how to write a screenplay. Like no one wants to watch a movie that is right out of a textbook. I feel like, this is, if it's a screenwriting 101 like demonstration, that's not an exciting film to watch per se.
So Ed Burns said it was his first positive review the Times had given him since the Brothers McGlone.
Oh man, that's sad because that's barely positive.
And he finishes it with it. I have to admit, reading that review felt great. I thought the Fitzgerald Family Christmas was my best film yet. It felt like the maturation of 17 years of figuring out how to make movies.
Oh, that's sadder than the review itself.
Feel the burns.
Man, oh boy. Okay. So Frank Scheck in The Hollywood Reporter was also relatively positive. He said, Returning to the Irish Catholic roots he explored in his 1995 debut breakout film, The Brothers McMullen, prolific actor-filmmaker Edward Burns delivers an overstuffed holiday feast in the Fitzgerald Family Christmas. This tale of a dysfunctional family whose members experience enough personal crises to fuel a dozen films is a virtual compendium of cliches, but the star's sheer likability makes it go down as easily as a cup of eggnog. Burns handles all of the disparate elements with admirable finesse, and despite the often predictable dialogue and situations, the film never fully descends into bathos. Even the predictable happy ending is made palatable by the incisive dialogue and, in particular, the wonderfully nuanced performances by veterans Anita Gillette and Ed Lauder.
So those two play the parents, and
Yes.
they're good. I think you and I would agree that Connie Britton is really the show stealer on this thing. She's great in this movie.
She is. I mean, and it's not like she has like big showy moments or even a very large part, but you can tell like she's the person in this cast who is like a star. You know, she has the charisma.
And not just that, like we know her because she's so, used the word prolific in that review. Like she's never going to be as big a star as she should be because she's like always reliable and trusty, but she's now, I would say, older middle-aged woman, and like they don't get the opportunities, but she could carry a movie. She's great.
She is, absolutely. And I love her. And I was really happy to see her show up here. And to give Ed Burns credit, he gave her first movie role in The Brothers McMullen. So good for him.
So she was in that and then got Spin City like a few months after. But what you're saying, Josh, is relevant to the making of this movie because it's obviously the Fitzgerald family. So he thought like, well, I want to make this movie with the Ed Burns family. So he went back to actors that he worked with before. Kerry Bishé, Caitlin Fitzgerald, Marsha, Dietlein, Johnny Solo, and Derek Coleman were in Newlyweds, your favorite Ed Burns movie. But I mean, and then Heather Burns was in The Groomsman, Anita Gillette, she's the one, Nick Sandow, No Looking Back, Connie Britton, like you said. And then I always think Mike McGlone, who I think is great also, Brothers McMullen, and she's the one as well. And he's a really fun character actor that I'd like to see more of than just the Geico guy.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to have mainly acted him and that Derek Coleman, the Irish guy who plays the abusive boyfriend of one of the Fitzgeralds. That their credits are primarily Ed Burns movies, but good for them. I kept thinking that the whole time Mike McGlone, I was like, is that Nicky Katt? Because we
I thought too.
We talked about Boiler Room, which is set in this very, very, very similar environment with similar kind of characters and is similarly crappy. And I kept thinking of him. They have the same kind of hair. I feel like that big slick backed, Guido kind of hair.
Well, McGlone is, I mean, he's Irish to the core, it feels like to me.
Right. Well, yes, you're right. Not Italian, but I mean, I feel like it's a similar personality and a similar presentation, a similar style. But I was counting up at least 13 of the actors in this film either were in previous Ed Burns films and or later Ed Burns films. It's virtually every single person in this film, someone that Ed Burns worked with.
Which he was again. In the book, he talks about how happy he was because they had that history. He felt like it added another layer to it, which maybe we can get more into, Josh, on our Field of Burns spinoff about Mike McGlone. I saw the TV Mike McGlone.
No. Field of Burns was a classic that you need to workshop that one a little more. So finally, review-wise, Mary Poles in Time magazine said, at a certain point, say 4 films into the Ed Burns oeuvre, being disappointed is no one's fault but your own. There is a somewhat pleasant sameness to the writer-director's films, like shuffling off to the old neighborhood pub every weekend. Everyone looks the same, sounds the same, and concerns themselves with the same issues. Weddings, funerals, procreation, childhood memories, the troubling matter of ambition, what beers are available on tap. With the Fitzgerald Family Christmas, Burns amps up the number of siblings to 7, thereby ensuring that the viewer will stay alert, desperately trying to sort out who are brothers, sisters, or possibly just attractive bystanders. This crowd of stereotypes creates such a cacophony of conversation, resentments, and rivalries that it is a challenge to sort out who, if anyone other than Jerry, to care about. Jerry being Ed Burns' character.
Burns. I know that was your biggest issue with the movie as well, that there were too many Fitzgeralds for this family Christmas, Josh.
Too many people. There's like, I mean, as one other review says, even in a positive sense, there's enough subplots in this movie for like 10 movies. None of them are served well. It just choppily kind of goes back and forth. You could cut out two of the siblings at least easily without affecting the movie in any way, except making it less annoying.
So this reviewer says Sidewalks of New York, that's his fourth movie, is the one to cut it off at right there. I liked Sidewalks of New York. I think I rewatched it when I was reading the book. As far as, look, I'm not disagreeing that there's a little mishmash in there. Maybe some more focus would have helped. His whole idea was that he grew up in these, large Irish Catholic neighborhoods with large Irish Catholic families. And his thought was like, hey, the age differences between the older siblings and the younger siblings means that even though they grew up in the same house, they all had very different ideas about their parents. So here you have 3, 3, and 3. And he said, the older siblings, the dad was around. The younger siblings hate him because he wasn't. And that was kind of something he wanted to explore here.
Well, he did. He sure did.
Dave, you believe this, man? I'm bringing all this research, all this meat, and Josh is just toothpicking it away at me.
No, I appreciate your effort to read I know you didn't read it for this episode, but I appreciate your breadth of knowledge about Ed Burns of all things.
Yeah. So I will tell you this, when I moved into this new house like a few months ago, and I am not good at organizing things. So I hired an organizer, and she put all my books like on these bookshelves, like I think in a way that made sense spatially, but they didn't make sense thematically. And last night I was like, I got to find Independent Ed and read this chapter again. So it did make me reorganize all my books. And man, that feels great.
That is good. If nothing else, Ed Burns has brought that to the world. Motivation for Jason to reorganize his bookshelf.
I mean, Josh, he's brought so many other things to the world, like Ash Wednesday and No Looking Back.
Have you seen those?
No.
But you have seen multiple Ed Burns.
Yeah, I've seen probably 5 or 6. I've definitely seen McGlone, She's the One, Sidewalks of New York, this one, and Purple Violets. So that's 5 right there, So
when you were saying that Purple Violets was in your top 5 or 6 Ed Burns movies, and you've only seen 5 or 6 Ed Burns movies,
well, that
really was not a compliment at all.
I mean, the thrust. There's so many other good ones. How can you? I actually like Purple Violets, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen Looking for Kitty or The Groomsman. Nice Guy Johnny, Josh. Haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I have not, like I said, seen any of them. And as I was looking through like Wikipedia, I mean, other than Brothers McMullen and She's the One, and then of course this, because we were going to watch it, I don't think I had heard of any of those other ones. And I mean, many of them really got very, very small releases. Again, by design. He made them for very little money. He put them out more or less on his own, on demand. And some people somewhere found them. The Burns heads discovered these films and watched them, presumably.
You mean the Burners?
The Burners, yeah. But this is one that you had seen before, right? This is one of them?
I think I watched this simply because I was reading the book, and I always look for different Christmas movies, and that was kind of like, oh, this would be one. Purple Violets I gave 3 stars to, Josh, on Letterboxd, so that's pretty good. So
it's mediocre, really. But
Deborah Messing? You don't like Deborah Messing, Josh?
I don't know about that. Dave, what's your Ed Burns experience?
Well, first of all, I did watch She's the One this week also for this podcast, but I have a formed opinion of Ed Burns, so I must have watched some of his movies, but I was looking at the list and I just can't even remember which ones they are. They all just seem like the same movie. I'm going off the posters here. I'm guessing The Brothers McMullen and maybe Sidewalks of New York, because I've seen at least 2. I don't think you can have an opinion on someone off just one movie.
Yeah, Josh.
No, well, I have an opinion on this movie. I will say that I think is fair.
Dave chose She's the One because of the amazing Tom Petty soundtrack, which is
Absolutely.
great. So.
Yeah, and I listened to that soundtrack a lot. It is great, and I never watched the movie. I never seemed to care to watch the movie, but I did love the soundtrack. I've always enjoyed Tom Petty's music, and I liked that as well. I remember it coming out and being on MTV, and I'm sure there was some music video with clips from the movie, and I did not watch the movie though.
Yeah, Tom Petty, I think we know he's a rock legend, but he's a little underrated for all the cool music movies he's made over the years. Interestingly, on She's the One, and I'm almost positive because he's Josh, you're going to like this. Ed Burns, huge Bruce Springsteen fan.
I'm shocked. It's completely out of character for him.
She's the One is, of course, off Born to Run. So I think he probably named it after that song. And then, Bruce didn't do the soundtrack, but Tom Petty did.
So he had to settle for Tom Petty.
Yeah, but I think Bruce has given him songs before. So
yeah, that's generous of old Bruce there. So anything else you want to read us an entire chapter of Independent Ed here before we take a break?
Well, I was going to start from the beginning, and we can just read the whole book as an audio
just
book
do the
for you.
audiobook. I'm sure Ed Burns himself read the audiobook, right?
You hope so. What's going on?
I don't know if you can do an Ed Burns.
I can't really, but I try. I think I got the
the shrugging.
Of it.
People can't see your shoulders, but
Fitzy. I'm crazy. I just met you yesterday. I can't do it. So,
you keep working on it. We'll get it eventually. So we'll come back and talk general thoughts on the Fitzgerald Family Christmas. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this second Christmas episode, and it's actually it's New Year's Day, I believe, as this episode is released. So it's still Christmas season, though. You're still eating Christmas leftovers, maybe picking up some wrapping paper off the floor or whatever. And so we have a Christmas leftover with the Fitzgerald Family Christmas from Ed Burns as part of our special retrospective season. And Jason, as a devoted burner, what do you like about this film, and what do you like about Ed Burns in general?
I mean, look, Brothers McMullen's his best movie and his first movie, right? So, and we talked about that with like Kevin Smith also, right? What I like, I think the other filmmaker to compare him to is Hal Hartley, who's great, and kind of making those Long Island stories and everything. So, look, I love 90s indies movies and the small stories that they tell. And I feel like this is a continuation of that. Like you said, it's like one big Ed Burns project and everything. The things that work for me, it's an easy movie to get through. And I like the family dynamics. And I think some of the dialogue is too on the nose and rote. And I agree with you. It could use more humor, which I saw in your letterbox.
Yeah, like any? People label this a comedy, and I'm like,
it's not a comedy.
It's not a comedy at all.
But I just think he surrounds himself with actors who I believe, and I just like these kind of small stories that could have been a play. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's up to his best.
Yeah, I do think it's bad. And maybe if I saw Brothers McMullen or She's the One that are, seemingly the heights of his career, maybe I would enjoy them more than this. Obviously, Dave did. So I don't know. But certainly this doesn't make me eager to devote my time to that.
You're a terrible Field of Burns co-host.
You're going to have to do a solo version of that, I think, in order to make it happen, because this does not seem like the kind of filmmaker whose entire filmography I want to wade through voluntarily.
As you watch 17 more VOD Christmas movies, which I
get paid to write about. So,
well, we get paid for Field of Burns because of all the sponsors.
Right,
Sure.
Right. Guinness is, you know what? If you line up Guinness to sponsor Field of Burns and pay us, I'm there. I don't
think Guinness wants you anymore because of your anti-Burnsian views.
I will say that this was less excruciating than some of those direct to VOD Christmas movies that I've been watching this week for an article. So it's got that going for it, I guess. But no, it's just so plodding and tedious. And I mean, yes, there are too many characters. It definitely took me, not only did it take a while to kind of get a handle on who are all the siblings, there's 7 of these siblings, and what is their deal, but even the individual stories are so uninteresting that at a certain point I'm watching the movie and I was like, okay, when you get the number at one point when Jerry or one of the siblings mentions how many of them there are, and it's like, okay, so there's 7 of these, and I was thinking in my mind, all right, who have we seen and who have we not seen? And okay, there was this sister doing this and this brother doing this, and I'd already forgotten about like 2 of the siblings that had already been introduced because none of these storylines are at all compelling. The performances are okay, and there are some good actors in this cast, and obviously they like working with Ed Burns because they do it over and over again, but the acting here is mediocre. The writing is mediocre. The dialogue is so repetitive. Like, how many times did some character say about the father, he walked out on us, he walked out on us? Like, it's just the same conversation over and over again.
No, I agree. That needed an edit, someone in there to just be like, hey, man, you got to move this to the next beat of the story or something. He does this thing where like he'll start a story and then he'll skip the whole middle and then he'll end the story, right? So, and one of the reviews that you read was like, hey, that was really good that he did that, but I think it could have used a little more focus. And I do think that whole idea of like, it's Christmas, I'm not letting dad come over. Dad should come over. Like, it got to be too much. I'm going to disagree with you. I think most of the acting holds its own here. I mean, and there are like the parents and Connie Britton are the standouts there.
I mean, I'm with you on Connie Britton. Not that it's like her greatest work or anything, but I think she's so talented that she stood out there. And I think it also helps that her character is not part of the family. And so she's not engaged in that same repetitive conversation as all the other characters. She gets to do something slightly different. And that helps. But I mean, even those older actors, Nita Gillette and Ed Lauter, who are good. I mean, especially the dad, he has the same dialogue over and over again. And, you know, just the sort of like, I don't know, maybe that's the Ed Burns thing, the like gruff working class way that everyone is talking. It's like, oh, I got the cancer. You know, it's like, it just felt so phony to me.
Why did it feel phony to you?
I mean, it felt like an affectation, I think, on the part of most of the characters. And I realize that Ed Burns is from this environment and he's writing what he knows and whatever, but it came across as like cosplay of these working class guys. And, you know, I mentioned Boiler Room, which I didn't like, but what I thought of also is a movie that we just talked about, which is Trees Lounge, that's set in this exact same environment in the same location with the same kind of characters, and it feels 100% authentic all the time. And this does not.
Yeah, well, you're not going to get me to disagree with you on the greatness of Trees Lounge.
Right. I know.
But I feel like I was not. I didn't feel it was inauthentic, and I did want to jump back to Connie Britton because you're like, it's not maybe not the best thing, but in a way it is, because that character has nothing and she turns it into something.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, that character is just there as like kind of a bounce board for the Ed Burns character.
Right.
And she like makes it a 3-dimensional character with layers. And it's like she took something that really wasn't there and made something there with it.
Yeah, no, you're right. And especially there's the one scene where Jerry is like overwhelmed with the Fitzgerald family drama and he calls her up and he's like, I just need to talk to somebody. And she, that's my impression, is not any better than
that's
yours.
Great.
And he drives to where she's a caretaker for this older lady, and she gets in the car with him and he just kind of like summarizes the plot thus far or whatever to her. And he's like, I'm sorry for unloading or whatever. And she's like, oh no, it's okay. She's just this perfect like sponge for him or whatever. And you're right. It really is the kind of female character that you would tell a male writer not to write, right? Who seems like she has no internal life and no purpose other than to prop up the male main character. But it feels like she does because Connie Britton gives her that.
Yeah. Well, read once again on Letterboxd, I was at where I'm go for Jason. I read Dave's review of She's the One, and I think he could shed some light into Ed Burns' writing of the male-female dynamic via that movie.
Oh, yeah. Men are pieces of shit. And I'm not entirely sure if he realizes that. And women just, kind of deal with it. Another thing about the dialogue in both movies, really, every scene feels like it could have been a phone call. Like there's no reason for people to interact in person.
You know, that's fair, but I think I can't say that on She's the One, because the reason I can say that on She's the One is because Brothers McGlone was $25,000 or so, right? And then he gets a $3 million budget, so he's still writing in that $25,000 ilk.
Mhm.
And then when you get to these, he's back to making these $25,000 movies, and this was $250. But I think the idea of, like I said, like, hey, this is the scene we have, and this is what we have, and that's all we're going to do. And it's very dialogue heavy. It's not big set piece running to the airport or wackiness or anything. So I think your point is fair, but I do think there's a reason for it. And honestly, Dave, there are a lot of phone calls.
I noticed that he loves, like, there's so many transitions where you hear a phone ringing or a doorbell from one scene to another. Like, he couldn't think of how else to make that happen. But yeah, I elsewhere in that Mary Poles review, and she just tears Ed Burns apart for a lot. So I, picked out, but she mentions this essential idea, and she says that, like, the entire movie could just take place with the characters, like, sitting on the couch yelling at each other. And I mean, that basically is true.
Well, I mean, that's not always a bad thing. I mean, I think back to the Richard Linklater movie Tape, which all takes place in one room, and clearly Tape, highly influenced by Ed Burns. No, that's not true at all. But I know, I know what you're going to say, and yes, we're showcasing one of the masters who's able to do that versus something like this. But I'm just saying it is doable.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Linklater is so much more talented than Ed Burns.
I mean, I would guess that Slacker was a huge influencer, or even Dazed and Confused, on, like, the Brothers McGlone back in the day.
Sure. Better movies influenced this guy's poor imitation of them. That is undoubtedly true.
Linklater rules, bro.
He does. Absolutely. I 100% agree. One of my favorite filmmakers. Dave,
Stay tuned for our spin-off podcast, The Missing Linklater.
That one I'm there for. I'm all in for that one. And people might actually listen to it as opposed to feel the burns. Dave, I wanted to ask you, what did you think of the horrible score in this movie?
Well, no, you're just shading it.
It's really bad.
It's so downtrodden and repetitive. I have to agree with you. So.
Yeah, terrible. Just the most basic kind of thing you could imagine for this kind of a drama.
Yeah, it's like this, like, plinky piano thing, like the guy is doing the whole score with one finger or something on the piano. It
feels like a riff off of, like, do 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 Little Bethlehem or whatever that Christmas song is, but, like, the sadder version of it. So.
Right. I think there are some, like, traditional Christmas songs interwoven into it, but even then, when you recognize a melody, it's just so plodding, and it just drove me crazy. Like, and it shouldn't be distracting like that. You have a generic score that's maybe not, like, ooh, interesting. You should just not really notice it. And noticing that it's bad is really bad.
Josh, what about Ed Burns as an actor?
I mean, Ed Burns is an actor.
He's solid. He's serviceable. Come on, man.
He's fine. He's fine.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, all the actors in this movie, like, are fine as actors. I don't know that any of them are doing their best work. I mean, we talked about Connie Britton, who is doing the best work in the movie, even if it's not her best work. But yeah, I mean, Ed Burns, it does seem like, even if the movies themselves are doing different things, or hell, even when he's in other people's movies, he really is just kind of playing the Ed Burns guy, right? And he does it fine.
That's who he is.
Right. But being an actor usually involves playing different kinds of guys.
You're saying he gets to the truth of himself.
Sure. Let's say that. What about the sort of shameless invocation of 9/11? How'd you feel about that?
Explain to me what you mean there.
Well, when Ed Burns and Connie Britton's characters are in the bar, the Fitzgerald family bar that he runs, and they're getting to know each other the first time, and he mentions how his fiance died on 9/11 and her dad died on 9/11. And I mean, they don't go hard on it, but it just felt like, what other kind of, like, hey, we're New York people, working class,
But they are. So what's your problem?
I don't know. It just felt cheap. I mean, and it's like, 11 years later or whatever, and that's the best he could come up with. I don't know. It just felt cheap to me.
I'm going to disagree. What I think it is, Josh, is the idea of like, the issue isn't that he used it, it's that he didn't explore it, like we could say with a lot of these other things, right? So it wasn't explored as much as it should have been. But I do think, that character, the Jerry character, where they're like, hey, there's reasons he still lives at home with mom, like those things do play out in their own ways, but it could have been used more effectively to have them relate to each other and to explain, why Jerry is who he is.
Right. Well, and the other thing that happens there, and this goes to the poor writing of the female character, is that both of them are like, we had this huge loss on 9/11, right? And this is something that kind of bonds them. And then she starts asking him a bit about the fiance, and he's like, oh, talks about something. And he's like, I don't know, this is too painful to talk about. It's like, she experienced a loss on the same way, but you're the one who's like, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it's okay. We don't have to talk about it.
It's also a movie, so you probably should talk about it, So,
that too. Yeah. And speaking of things like off screen, someone on Letterboxd mentioned that the main conflict of the mom not wanting the dad to come for Christmas is resolved with a phone call that occurs off screen, where in one scene, she's just like, oh yeah, I called him and it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, to me, the biggest issue of that was, and this kind of plays into all those things. There's 9? Are there 9 Fitzgeralds? Or
yeah, well, if you don't count the spouses, yes, there's 7 kids and 2 parents. Yeah.
So the one, he had the good name, the kid that got out of rehab.
Cyril. Yeah,
Cyril. Yeah, Cyril Fitzy. I'm with Cyril Fitzy. So Cyril literally just gets out of rehab for drugs and alcohol. And then there's like one conversation, like, you're going to be okay if I leave you at home? Do I need to lock up the liquor cabinet? And then they never come back to it. And I thought that was the most underbaked of those stories.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, and there's a big confrontation later with the 2 sisters played by Kerry Bishé and Caitlin Fitzgerald. The two, they're like, the 3 of them are the youngest siblings. And they talk about how he, I guess he was on crack. They call his friends crackheads. And I don't know if that was just meant to be a euphemism or if they were literally smoking crack. But either way, he was on something and he stole stuff from them or whatever. And they have a moment there. But yeah, it's super underplayed. And I was wondering if he was going to like backslide or something, if that was going to be a bit of drama. I feel like there were moments where they were maybe foreshadowing something more serious. And I would have not wanted more melodrama out of this movie, but there's another moment where the Mike McGlone character, he and Ed Burns have been at the bar and they're leaving and Ed Burns is like, are you okay to drive? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. And I thought, oh, he's going to die in a car accident, but he didn't. He just went home and nothing happened. Yeah, I mean, other things, the other off-screen thing that bugged me is there's a whole big deal about how the mother wants to take her little grandson, Heather Burns' character's son, to get baptized, but her husband is a Jewish atheist, and so they haven't wanted that, and she's going to do it in secret. So she finally gets her moment to do that, and she goes to the church, and you see her in the church, and she has a whole scene with the priest, played by Malachi McCourt, and they're talking about the dad and how he's dying and whatever, and the kid is there in the stroller. And then she's like, well, thanks for the baptism, bye. And I was like, where was the fucking baptism? We've been talking about this for like 20 minutes.
Nah, you didn't need to see the baptism. What would that have been? Like, okay, the boy is now baptized.
I'm not saying that I wanted to see it. I felt like Ed Burns wanted me to want to see it and then wouldn't show it to me.
Yeah, me and Gina were trying to figure out the whole time who the Jewish character was.
Yeah,
it's like another thing.
It's Heather Burns' husband. I did get that. Yeah. Nick Sandow's character is the Jewish one who he has his own whole family drama they talk about, right? His dad is now remarried to a younger woman who's not Jewish and they're going to have Christmas and it's a whole thing. Yeah. There's way too many movies in this movie.
Perhaps this will give you a better understanding, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
Let me read from Independent Ed.
Please do.
The script poured out of me, and within 4 weeks, I had a first draft. I had been sitting on these types of characters and their voices for a long time, and they were clearly ready to get out. I never had to stop and think, who are these people? Where do they live? How do they think? Where do they drink? What do their homes look like? Or any other intimate details. I knew these people because I literally grew up with them.
I'm just imagining Jason's copy of Independent Ed with all these little Post-its on, tabs sticking out of it and highlights and everything.
This is a paragraph that I think you would like, Josh, because we're talking about authenticity and are these people real? Like, okay, you got to give him this one, Josh. Anytime I write a script, I think about environment. While we were scouting locations on Long Island, I started to snap photographs of people on the street to inform how my characters would dress. I ran into an old friend in the Green Acres Mall. He was wearing a black leather jacket, an Argyle sweater, and a gold chain and crucifix hanging on the outside of the sweater. The minute I saw him, I knew that was my wardrobe my character would wear. You got to give him that, right?
I mean,
he wore it.
He wore it. I will give him that. He did wear it, and you do notice that he's wearing it. I will say that I don't know that I could describe what any of the other characters were wearing exactly, other than like they looked like they were dressed. But that guy, Jerry, especially with the crucifix necklace, definitely is noticeable.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk about one other little subplot here that I'm sure you're going to hate. Let's talk about Noah Emmerich's involvement in the film.
Yeah.
You mean FX?
Right.
Yeah. What a cool name.
Playing cable channel FX, home of the Americans, starring Noah Emmerich.
Yeah. What was his real name in there?
Francis Xavier. I kept thinking of
Xavier,
Charles Xavier from the X-Men.
Francis Xavier, FX. That's a cool name.
Yeah, it's not a name that any person would have. No, that whole subplot, like, first of all,
FX rules.
As soon as it's Mike McGlone's character and Kerry Bishé's character, brother and sister, and they each have these significant others. And there's the big Ed Burns is really into the age differences in between the characters, right? Because both of these characters are in these age gap relationships from opposite ends. And they go away to the Hamptons for the weekend or for a couple days or whatever. They skip the mom's birthday party. And it's immediately obvious that their significant others are going to leave them to get together. And we have to go through this whole rigmarole to get there. And I realize we're meant to sympathize with the Fitzgeralds, but there's one moment where they're out on the beach, the brother and sister, and they get a phone call that their other sister, the Caitlin Fitzgerald character, has been kind of roughed up by her husband, who has obviously done this before, and she needs the family, and so they're going to rush to help her, which is totally understandable.
Real fast, though. They don't get a phone call from her. They get a phone call from Richie T.
Richie T, who shows up in the, I was like, who the hell is this guy? Right? She gets roughed up, and then suddenly he's like lurking on the street, and he walks up. He's like, "Oh, are you okay?" Like, who the hell is this?
He's a neighbor across the street. He's a good neighbor.
Dave, did you understand who that guy was?
No, not at all.
It's Richie T. Come on.
So Richie T.
You don't even live in the neighborhood, Josh. You got to know Richie T if you're in the neighborhood.
So Richie T calls them and they're like, we got to go help our sister. Okay, fine. Right. But then you discover that even though they're standing on the front in the beach, you can see the house in the shot where they're standing. They don't even walk inside and say, hey, we got to go. They just zip the hell out of there in the only car that they have, apparently, leaving these people stranded. And then Kerry Bishé gets all pissed when FX calls her and is like, hey, where did you go? She's like, well, we got a family emergency. What the hell? It's like, okay. No, I do not like you, Fitzgeralds.
Well, so to me, the bigger issue with that is later in the movie that he's like, yeah, are you guys coming back tonight? And he's like, Noah Emmerich's like, nah, we're going to hang out here. And then she's like, what? Come on. And he's like, but how would they get home if they took the car?
Right. Well, he seems like he's rich. They make it offhand. So, he could presumably get them an Uber or something. I don't know if Uber existed in 2012.
FX got that money, bro.
Right. FX can get them out of there, but he doesn't want to because he's busy boning Mike McGlone's girlfriend. And you know what? Good for them. They're the only people in the movie I'm like, things worked out. Good for them. They're having a nice Christmas.
Yeah. Good for FX and that 22-year-old fiance of not fiance.
She wasn't his fiance yet.
I know he was going to propose to her just because, though.
Yeah. No, and he's another one. It's like, speaking of the authenticity, there's a moment early in the movie where he's like at his office, which was like the least convincing workplace ever. It was like, hey, I'm at the work where I work. No, that was not believable at all. I don't know. Just everything in this
He
movie.
was drafting sketches for the new advertisement or something.
Sure he was.
Come on, that's Fitzy. That's what Fitzy does.
What did you think of the FX subplot?
I mean, it kind of, at least it tied up, right? So it tied up, and I like the house they were in. So, and it's always nice to see Noah Emmerich. So, and I like the name FX. So there's plenty to like in this subplot, if you ask me.
No, I mean, it tied up so neatly. Like, you could have removed that entirely from the movie and it would have made absolutely no difference whatsoever.
Josh and Dave, enough of your trashing. Tell me the things you did like in the movie.
I mean, Connie Britton, we've talked about it already. That's about it.
Dave?
I mean, I don't mind Ed Burns as an actor. I think he leads the movie well,
Yeah, I feel like he's the definition of I don't mind that guy, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
even, as much as I'm trashing this movie, like, I don't hate Ed Burns. He's like the cinematic equivalent of a plain bagel.
Mm-hmm. Although I do like plain bagels.
I do too, actually. Yeah.
How can you, Dave? Can you eat plain bagels now on keto?
No.
Is Ed Burns keto though? Is he keto friendly? You digest an Ed Burns movie?
We'll have to find out on episode 2.
Yeah.
And to get there, we have to rate this film. Josh, should we rate it out of 5 Fitzgeralds?
Yeah, it would have been better if there were only 5 Fitzgeralds instead of 9. I give it 2 Fitzgeralds out of 5. It's not good. I'm sorry.
Josh, you are 1 Fitzgerald away from giving it a fair rating. It gets 3 Fitzgeralds from me.
Yeah, see, that's not even that high. So,
what do you? I mean, it's positive.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It is positive. It is positive.
Come on.
Yeah, Dave, how do you rate this?
I'm also going with 2.
Yeah.
But Gina was going to give it
1. And in the middle of the movie, she said, "Jason has really bad taste."
Wait a second. That is totally unfair, man. So,
man.
Wait, did I once say like, "Oh, we got to watch it. This is the greatest movie ever"?
No, but how many times have we talked about Ed Burns in episodes on movies completely unrelated to Ed Burns?
That's part of the charm of this podcast. But if you want the truth, if you were like, hey, what Ed Burns movie should we cover? I would have said Brothers McMullen, but it's not a Chris. So Gina can go fuck herself, Dave.
Well, all right. You're bringing a bit of that working class energy here.
Yeah, that was totally unnecessary. How dare she judge me off of one Christmas film?
Well, as you said, maybe we'll get to Brothers McMullen eventually. But for now, we'll come back and talk about the legacy of the Fitzgerald Family Christmas. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. Happy New Year, I think. And we are talking about the Fitzgerald Family Christmas in this special retrospective, special Christmas episode of our retrospective season, looking this time at 2012. And, we've talked a lot here already about the career of Ed Burns. And regardless of our opinion on the quality of his films, as Jason said, you have to give him credit for continuing to make his movies exactly the way that he wants to make them. After this movie came out, he continued making these small films that mostly came out on VOD, did not exactly have huge audiences, but generally were released. His most recent film to this point, until films that he has coming up, unfortunately, was a 2019 film called Beneath the Blue Suburban Skies. Then that one actually did not ever get distributed. I don't know what the status is of it. But as Jason, I think you and I were talking about, he seems to have this relationship with the Toronto Film Festival that no matter how small his films are and how little attention they get, they always seem to end up being able to premiere at Toronto.
I mean, he does have that, but he's also had a blossoming television career since this. Mob City, Public Morals, and his show Bridge and Tunnel. So that's him as an actor, although Bridge and Tunnel he created, not as an actor. But the 2 movies coming up, Josh, which you can probably see in Toronto, Miller's in Marriage. Eve Miller, a former indie rock singer, struggles with her toxic marriage while growing attracted to a music journalist. Her sister Maggie, a best-selling author, faces marital discord as her career overshadows her husband. That sounds very Ed Burnsy.
Yeah, it does. And that did, in fact, premiere at Toronto this past year in September 2024, and did get picked up by Republic Pictures, which is the straight to VOD division of Paramount. So that sounds about right.
Yeah. But Josh, if you really want to get into the deep weeds of where Ed Burns belong, his next movie, which has finished principal photography, Finnegan's Foursome, two middle-aged brothers and their respective sons travel to Ireland to play the Finnegan's family annual golf outing, where they distribute the ashes of family patriarch. That just sounds like Ed Burns 101 right there.
Yeah, I feel like it's a miracle that that's not called Fitzgerald's foursome, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you mention that because it's like, because, you know, he and his brother did create that TV show, The Fighting Fitzgeralds,
Starring Connie Britton.
And Brian Cox and everything. So, you know, I feel like, McMullen's foursome, Finnegan's foursome, it's all, you know. But he's had good success as an actor, Saving Private Ryan, The Holiday, 27 Dresses, you know, so.
Although since this film, he has not been working as an actor. I mean, if we're talking about like the legacy, I was surprised to see that the only acting credits he has after this movie are in his own projects. Like you said, those two. And you said he created Bridge and Tunnel. He also created Public Morals. And both of those shows were short-lived, but he wrote and directed every single episode of both of those shows.
So that's pretty good, man.
Yeah.
So there you go. So.
But I wonder if he's, given up the idea of being this kind of actor for hire. I was surprised to see that he hasn't really been doing that as much now.
I mean, after in the mid to late 90s, he was a reliable, like, leading man, not in like you build a movie around him, but you build him into the female's like love interest, and he was always there and probably made a lot of money to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, again, whatever his strategy has been, it has worked for him, and he seems to not be struggling to do what he wants to do. So we should all aspire to be like Ed Burns in that way.
Connie Britton will soon be in Zero Day with Robert De Niro and Jesse Plemons. In the midst of crisis, how can we discover the truth when it seems that the world is being destroyed by uncontrollable forces? Also, to what extent are conspiracy theories our own inventions or products of our imagination? Sure.
I love Connie Britton, as I've said. I mean, Friday Night Lights, one of the greatest TV shows of all time, and she's so good on that. Movie-wise, she usually ends up in more supporting roles, but she's great, for example, in The Land of Steady Habits, which is a Nicole Holofcener movie, where I remember watching that movie, and that's like the only Nicole Holofcener movie that's not about like a female main character. And Ben Mendelsohn plays the main character, and he's good. But I remember watching that movie and thinking this should have been about Connie Britton's character. I feel that way about watching this movie too.
I mean, I'm all for more Connie Britton. She plays like the mom in the other Reality Winner movie, Winner, not
right?
Reality.
I didn't see. I saw Reality. I didn't see Winner.
Well, this one could be, talking about her as a lead. This sounds interesting. She's in a movie called Phony. Coming up, and after waking up from a freak car accident, Sonny discovers that his mother has been replaced by an imposter.
And she's the imposter mother?
Maybe, I would think so.
All right, sure, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many actors in this film. I feel like, to sort of note are Kerry Bishé and Caitlin Fitzgerald, who kind of had breakout TV roles after this. Kerry Bishé starring on Halt and Catch Fire. Caitlin Fitzgerald on Master of Sex and Succession and Station 11. I feel like, you watch this movie now and you notice them. And I had to mention Kerry Bishé. Dave, it's a shame you're not wearing your shirt of this because, of course, she played Madam Webb's mom, who was in the Amazon researching spiders before she died.
Hell yeah. Amazing.
She was the narrator on the last season of Scrubs. And she was in Argo. I think she was one of the captives in one of the hostages in Argo. Caitlin Fitzgerald, this could be a cool movie. I think it's Idris Elba's first co-directorial debut. Above the Below, 3 astronauts are returning to Earth. When their vessel is forced off course during re-entry, they struggle to survive after being cut off from contact as their capsule sinks into the ocean. So forget about all these plane movies sinking to the ocean. Now we have a space capsule sinking into the ocean.
Sure. If you add sharks into that, I'm there.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Josh, Anita Gillette, big time Broadway actress. We saw her in Moonstruck, where we were here. Tony Geary, you're killing me, Smalls. He was Smalls, Josh. Smalls.
That's the Sandlot, right? Which I've still never seen.
Yeah, well, we got to cover that. So, and then Ed Lauder, who died shortly after the making of this movie, was in more than 200 films and TV shows. He was a comedian. King Kong, The Rocketeer, and The Artist were the 3 that I picked. But I did want to say, Josh, Michael McGlone, also a singer, songwriter, and novelist.
Yeah, well, that's good because his acting career is pretty slim. But
no, he's doing good. He's the Geico guy. You know how much money you make off?
Well, right, but I mean,
Geico guy?
it's yeah, he does a lot of voiceover work and narration and stuff too. So as far as an on-camera actor, you know, he's just if Ed Burns needs somebody, he calls Mike McGlone.
I hope he's a Finnegan.
I do too. So I guess I noticed Brian Darcy James, who shows up very briefly in this film as the ex-husband or the soon-to-be ex-husband of the Fitzgerald sister who's having sex with the gardener, Skippy. He's playing Skippy. He must have done really well here because he's a Finnegan and he's in multiple Ed Burns movies in like increasingly prominent roles later on.
See, he has a company, Josh, a repertory company, just like John Cassavetes.
Sure.
Mike McGlone is Ben Gazzara to Ed Burns.
We'll leave it at that. And that is the Fitzgerald Family
Connie
Christmas.
Britton is his Jenna Rollins, Josh. Come on.
I could give you that one maybe.
All right.
That's
what a Christmas gift to me. Feel the burns.
That's Feel the Burns. That's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can share your detailed Ed Burns opinions with us online and on social media.
Unless you're a scumbag like Gina, then keep it to yourself. We're at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Gina, the social platform.
Oh man, you're comparing her to Twitter. That's awful.
How dare she say I have terrible taste in movies just because I wanted one Christmas movie and it's an Ed Burns movie. I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all the things. Go for Jason on Letterboxd. Look for Eat This Comedy and the Trivia Party out there.
You can find some old things from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky, and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie for some reason, or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And you can check out our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
I'll just say really quick. Remember, Gina also criticized Josh as the women.
Well, she's right on that one.
Yeah, and then she watched the remake like a week or two ago and also didn't like that.
No, the remake is terrible, and that was a mistake on her part. I will give her that.
Yeah. Hey, Fitzy.
You can find Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
And come see one of the many live shows that Dave does.
Yeah, come see some of the live shows.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some Ed Burns opinions in the Facebook group. So, Jason, what's in our next episode?
Josh, is it your pick or Dave's pick?
No, it's Dave's pick.
Well, then, Josh, you shouldn't answer and I shouldn't answer. Dave, it's your first pick for the 20th anniversary season. What did you pick, Dave?
I am picking 2007's Hot Rod, which is a movie I do not know how I have never seen, considering it seems like everybody who loves the shit that I like loves it. So
it's a good one. I liked it.
I've never seen it either, so that'll be interesting for us to experience. Tune in next time for Hot Rod, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
And have a Merry Fitzgerald's Family Christmas.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
Feel the Burns theme music into the outro. Feel the Burns theme music back into the intro, Dave. You know how these work.
yeah, I'm not doing all that. Just the intro.